Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here, and this is how to use Silvally. So this guide is going to look a little different from my other guides. Normally I'd go and show some like typings for the Pokemon right here. However, this thing works like Arceus, that we're going to have memories instead of plates, and it's going to give us a monotyping of our choice, and I'm not going to show all of those on screen. So pretty much, as long as you have your Pokemon basics down, just know everything about all the solo types, and we will be good to go. I'll say that the only thing you really need to research about the Silvally is going against it. That if you're going against the Silvally, it's good to know what kind of memory that Silvally might have, and that's why hopefully this thing on screen will help you out just a little bit, because you need to see all the different colors and all the different types of the Silvally. That way you can kind of distinguish on the fly the difference between Fairy, Psychic, and Ghost. Get a little complicated right there. Now, when editing this video, I realized that this is actually a big problem with Silvally because it lights up like a freaking Christmas tree and it broadcasts what typing it is, because we're going to talk about some strategies and some playing around with Silvally later on in this video. But because of that, well, you'll know it's a fairy typing, so you can play around what potential set that's going to be. If it doesn't light up, well, then that means you know it's probably a life orb set, and then you can also make adjustments based on that, know which type to not really worry about. So that's going to be a weakness that will probably come into play pretty big when using Silvally. And now let's go and talk about Silvally and how the whole type versus plate versus memory system works. I think it's actually pretty bad. That ice memories, for example, don't give any boost. Plates give a boost to Arceus, so that's where Arceus is going to gain a lot of power. That becomes that typing, and that's also going to get 20% extra damage on top of its stab, and then just have better stats than the Silvally. The memories, they don't do any of that, just changes the typing. So that could be pretty bad. And then looking at Silvally's stats, on the surface, it's like really cool. It's like, oh my goodness, even stats. This thing has Arceus' stats, because it's like a makeshift Arceus. That's awesome, but then you realize 95 in the speed and in the offenses is going to be probably the biggest hindrance right here. Like, 95 hit points, defense, special defense, really good. Like, that's going to be a solid tanky Pokemon right there. And it's the reason why Arceus is so good. There's going to be a lot of Arceus comparisons in this video, because, okay, not only do you have to deal with a 120 speed Pokemon throwing out 120 base attacks, we have to worry about 120 hit points and defenses, which is really, really difficult when you actually start to break it down, because that's an absurdly tanky Pokemon. And Silvally gets a little bit of that, but doesn't have the damage. I mean, if it had a 105 base speed, it would work, but then that would kind of go against its lore and its playstyle. Like, I think it's one of the coolest things ever. That type Null also has a 59 speed, and then just switches it around when it evolves, so that's like one of the sweetest things ever. But if this Pokemon had 105 on everything, I think it would still work. Like, I would have liked to see maybe Silvally just go to the next level, be above a pseudo-legendary with like 105 and everything. Could have been a little broken then, but I mean, people might have found ways to work with it or work around it. But just that 95 speed with the offenses turns out to just be a bad Pokemon, unfortunately. So let's go over to Cerebi and see what we can do with the Silvally, that at least it has some crazy coverage. I'm not going to call it really good, but it's really fun that we have like Iron Head, Poison Fang, Fire Fang, Ice Fang, so we get all the coverage fangs. We run into the X's, or we have Crunch, we have Air Slash, we can go into Razor Wind, Tri Attack, Parting Shot. We do all kinds of weird things. We have crazy special coverage as well. We have the Thunderbolt, we have the Ice Beam, we have the Flamethrower. We can go into other moves like the Flame Charge if we want to gain some speed. We have Shadow Claw, Swords Dance, Rock Slide. Oh my goodness. This is maybe one of the saddest things I've ever seen. It gets Explosion. So Silvally is a man-made Pokemon. It was created from the parts of other Pokemon and then combined to be this ferocious god-slaying Pokemon. And it was also given a self-destruct button. That's a little unfortunate. It doesn't, yeah, it gets Draco Meteor Tutor, so I guess that's something you can maybe tech into a set if you really wanted to. Snarl can be usable in doubles, just, you know, you hit both opponents, you make their special attack drop. So, like, slight amounts of utility, not enough damage, not a lot of high base power moves, except for maybe that Draco Meteor, so that's a bit of a problem right there. And that's what I'm just looking at with the Silvally. It's like, what can we really do with it? There's not really extreme speed like the Arceus either. It's just kind of awkward when we break it down that, yeah, like Arceus, it just sets up Swords Dance at extreme speeds and then everything dies, but without any boosting, without like the right amount of coverage and the right transitioning, it's going to be kind of tricky to use. So let's go and hop into Pokemon Showdown and see what we can do with the Silvally. So let's just go Jolly Nature, you know, max out the speed, try to get the most out of that, go into the attack investment, and then see what we can do physically, because physically we can pull off some interesting things. I was just thinking Iron Head, Crunch, Explosion, and then whatever our multi-attack is going to be. I think the Fairy Memory is going to do really well, because Fairy Memory is going to give us crazy coverage. It means we're going to be able to get those Dragon-type Pokemon, those Fighting-type Pokemon, those Dark-type Pokemon, and then a lot of really solid neutral hits as well. Iron Head is going to coverage out against Rock-type Pokemon, against Ice-type Pokemon. Crunch is going to take care of Ghosts and Psychics, so we're finding nice coverage overall, and then also just really good neutrality coverage, because like Dark with Fairy, and then a little bit of Steel, good to go, and then worst case scenario, we just go and blow everything up for the biggest damage possible. That's like it, that's kind of it. You run Memory, you run the coverage that kind of works with that, but then at the end of the day, it's a 95 base attack. Like, a sweeper Pokemon is generally looked over if it doesn't have over 100 speed and over 100 in an offensive stat, and Silvally doesn't even get either of those. Now, we could even maybe go Adamant Nature. It's like, okay, everything's outspeeding us anyways, so I guess we can take that, and then maybe also transition down to, like, a wall-breaking Pokemon. Like, okay, let's just try to get bulky, let's try to get the most tankiness that we can, and then maybe something will come of it. But it's still like, okay, we've already seen Pokemon that have more bulk and can throw down more damage just in the 7th generation alone, so Silvally is going to struggle quite a bit. Other things, Life Orb. Life Orb is weird on the Silvally. That's all I can say. Is like everything is kind of weird when you break it down with the Silvally, because special attacking, well, what's the point of having a memory on a special attack, because the Arceus system is only going to work with multi-attack, and multi-attack is only going to be a physical attack, so no boosting right there. And the Life Orb, instead of giving 50% to one move, because effectively, say for example we can go and put an Ice Memory on Silvally, well that means our Ice Beam now gets 50% boost because of Stab, or instead we can just run the Life Orb and then have various coverage, so Ice Beam, Flamethrower, Flash Cannon, Surf, do something simple like that, and then just run plus 30% on everything with a 95 special attack, 95 speed Pokemon. Again, we can do similar things. We could either just make it a bulky special attack breakdown kind of Pokemon that we put all the investment in hit points, or we can try to outspeed what we can and then put the rest into the speed as well. Just looking at the coverage, there's some other weird things you can do. I like the Hyper Beam. I honestly like the idea of a Hyper Beam on the special attacking set, because here's the deal. You're a slow Pokemon. If they bring in a sweeper and you know you can survive one hit, I would rather go for the Hyper Beam, because that's going to be stab boosted because you're a normal type Pokemon without any memories or anything. Life Orb, Hyper Beam, that's going to be enough damage to KO things, and it doesn't matter if you have to recharge because you were going to pretty much die anyways. So that's like a good way of finishing off a Pokemon in a pinch if you don't have the coverage for it. That just kind of shows like Silvally, once we get into damage calculations, it's really going to show that you have to hit super effective, or else it just doesn't matter, and that's going to be kind of tricky. We have the Swords Dance, so technically Swords Dance is going to be like a really big thing against tanky Pokemon, that if they're going for setup, well, you're going to Swords Dance, and then you're going to have like the really good coverage against them with the multi-attack, Iron Head, Crunch, and if I'm running Swords Dance, I'd get rid of the Explosion and run that instead. So that could be a way of dealing with tanky Pokemon. There's already a lot of really good tank-busting Pokemon that people would prefer the Mimikyu in the 7th generation over the Silvally, because if I'm going for Swords Dance into damage, I mean, it's actually really sad when you look at the Mimikyu. Mimikyu has 90 attack and 96 speed, so it's slightly faster than Silvally for slightly less attack. Now, it isn't as tanky, but with the disguise, you're still getting a free Swords Dance anyways. So, this synthetically created Arceus God Pokemon doesn't do as much as other normal Pokemon. It's kind of awkward right there. Now, like I said, when we go back to the moveset and we look around at some of the things, it's cool, but it doesn't really do enough. Like in doubles, maybe you could do Snarl, so that means you'd be more of a tanky supportive Pokemon, that we'd go into like the Thunder Wave, and then we set up a Snarl, and then we're just playing like this status as like a pseudo-tanky Pokemon that might convert some damage if we need it. On the special set, like I said, Draco Meteor could work. The Dragon Memory, like, the memories are kind of weird. If you run Dragon Memory, you're going to have some decent weaknesses, but it kind of shows that if you're running a memory as well, you're going to become that Pokemon, so you can use it for the resistances and weaknesses as well as the offenses. So I mean, like, Dragon Memory Draco Meteor is going to be absurd amounts of damage, but that's kind of all you're going to get out of it. Everything else isn't even going to be Life Orb boosted, and it's going to be very low neutral hits, and maybe even super effective hits that won't find KOs. Other things like the Flame Charge, I guess on the physical set, instead of running like the Explosion, you could run the Flame Charge. That Flame Charge is going to give you those extra stats. That's where it's like, okay, 95 base speed into +1. That's looking good. That's going to start finding you some really good outspeeds, and that's kind of what you can do. You can add them into the Flame Charge, use that to survive, and then try to outspeed. I think that that's going to be the most that Silvally is capable of, and if you're a 3-hit KO Pokemon, you might be in for some luck. and you also might want to try to look for more specific coverage. Like, the good thing about Silvally is that it will cure whatever you need in your team. That if you need more of a certain attack, or if you need a different varied level of coverage, Silvally can bring that for you. And if you're just bringing it in, like, don't manually switch this thing in unless you know it's going to be like a massively resisted hit, but just kind of bring it in whenever you get the opportunity to, set up that flame charge, and now if you're a 3-hit KO Pokemon, okay, I'm outspeeding, I'm doing damage, I'm taking damage. I'm outspeeding, I'm KOing. I'm outspeeding, I'm KOing. You know, if you can find super effective hits or enough to actually get the damage, then maybe Silvally will be useful, but at the end of the day, the damage numbers don't really back it up, and that's why I have a lot of damage calculations to talk about. I've got like 5 things right here, and it's just going to go even deeper. So, Silvally, Adamant Nature, multi-attack, not really going to do anything for us. That even against a Pokemon like Weavile, which we've been using as like the standard for a Pokemon that needs to get broken, multi-attack does 2/3 of its health, a little more than that, and it doesn't really matter. Like, okay, what happens if we have... I'm trying to think about something neutral, so I guess we would go and want the ground memory. Well, I mean, the memories aren't even in here because they don't change anything. Like, it's effectively just going to make me a ground typing instead of a normal. So what we do to simulate the memory is we go ground, and then we change this to ground. And yeah, multi-attack is going to be the same regardless. So it's not like that plate. The plate would give us more damage. The plate would boost us and actually augment our power, so that way we can specialize with that typing and then use that as our primary source of damage instead of just not having anything extra over a life orb or something like that. So that's going to be a problem, but this shows like the flame charge setup would work out. That you flame charge, you know, flame charge is going to be just guaranteed damage, especially against Weavile for that super effective hit. So flame charge is going to be big, multi-attack finishes off. Now we only took 1 hit from the Weavile for a KO. If we are still like going to survive that next hit, then we could get a KO. So we get 2 for 1 with this, and maybe even like 2.5 for 1, depending on the Pokemon that they bring in. That's going to be kind of gambly, that you need to have the right set for the Pokemon that they respond with. If they have like a Scarf Pokemon with 100 base speed, which is fairly common because you're running Adamant, so like Timid on that 95 or higher with a Scarf, or Jolly on that Scarf will be pretty good. You could have an Adamant Garchomp just kind of come in with a Scarf and outspeed you. So decent range on the Scarfers, but against other ones, another problem could be like, oh, Salamence comes in and Dragon Dances, unless you're running the Fairy multi-attack. The Fairy multi-attack probably puts in some good work, so let's see what that comparison would be. But it's just about that coverage, that if you're not running the right one at the right time, then that's where things get pretty bad. Like, I'm just trying to discover things about... There's no way. Oh, the Intimidate. So yeah, Salamence can respond to you with that Intimidate. It gets the Dragon Dance for free, and then it goes and does big amounts of damage back if it wants to. Now... this is where things also get weird. As that Fairy, you are going to be very specialized against Salamence, but I'm just bringing out examples. So at least we get rid of the primary stab of the Salamence, so maybe it won't be able to turn around and do as much back to us, but we're already taking damage on that setup with the Flame Charge. So it can still go, and it still needs to have the right situations, but yeah, maybe a little better than I've been giving it credit for, but it's still... I think that Flame Charge set is kind of like the only way to get the most efficiency out of the Silvally, and if you get forced out by something, you know, they just bring in a really dense and tanky Pokemon, Toxapex. I think Toxapex would completely wall out this set right here, which would be unfortunate, but if you're running like multi-attack ground, that means you don't have a response for the Salamence now, and just shows that most likely there's going to be something on the opponent's team that will deal with your Silvally, and that's where the problems start coming in. Other things, just kind of like trying to get the other damage. So this is the Life Orb set. We would need something like the Double Edge to find enough damage, or the Return. So we're running a physical set, and it has the Life Orb. I just showed the special set on the Life Orb, I believe. So, I know the screen region's all kind of screwy. But, like, if you run a physical set with Life Orb, it's got the same idea as a special set. You're running it for coverage, which means your Return starts doing reasonable amounts of damage. You are still taking damage on Life Orb, you're still getting outsped. You have to worry about just having the Adamant Nature, so you're going to be a little slower than other Pokemon as well. But the Return, the Iron Head, these start finding low range KOs. Anything tankier than a Weavile, and you're not going to find a one-hit KO, which is fairly unfortunate. Like, what happens if we have 75, and then, like, 75? So Return stops KOing. The Oricorio, I don't remember which one Oricorio was. Yeah, Oricorio is a low chance, 1 in 3 chance to KO if you're going to be hitting it with that Return. Double Edge would be just way too much damage. Then you're going to be losing a third of your health plus another 10% off that Life Orb. So, I mean, Double Edge is a thing you could do for, like, big nukes. But even then, it's not going to KO something like a Garchomp, but then that's when you'd be running, like, hopefully a Memory for it. That's why I like the Fairy Memory. The Fairy Memory just suppresses dragons so well that it might give you an opportunity, but that Double Edge, still not going to be enough in the end. But if we're not running the Fairy Memory, then we don't have any kind of Fairy-type coverage. So, badness right there. The special attacking set. So I'm thinking Timid or Modest or whatever. Timid's gonna give you the most speed. Moss will go give it to you. But even then, like, okay, 70, 75, those are the super effective KO ranges. So that means we're either 2-hit KOing as a potentially slower Pokemon with these ranges right here on like 70, 75, because that's going to be a sweeper. Like if something has 75 base hit points and 70 base special defense, it's most likely a Life Orb something that's trying to do something else. And we can also go and bring up like a Greninja, for example. So Greninja, it gets the 2-hit KO us all day long while outspeeding, and we don't really get to do much of that back. And on this set, yeah, you don't even have a coverage move for the Greninja except for that Hyper Beam. So Hyper Beam would be enough to KO the Greninja. I can only hope, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So yeah, Hyper Beam will find it, but you take a lot of damage and then the KO comes through. Greninja, on just those neutral hits, it'll outspeed and it'll just dunk you. So that's why even on like super effectives, it's still rather challenging for this. I was just starting to show a Garchomp defensive matchup. You know, Scarf Chomp just goes, outspeeds you, hits you with 2 Earthquakes, and you die. So even that 95 on the hit points and taking this, if we're not invested to it, it's not going to be that fantastic. Now the Ice Beam will work, but that's also special set versus physical set versus coverage set, or whatever else you're doing. I just feel like if your opponent has a balanced team and they have like 2 varied tanks, that if they have a tank for a certain amount of Pokemon and they have another tank that does a different job, like I said, I feel like the Toxapex and then another tank, and then Silvally doesn't even matter anymore. So that could be a big problem for the Silvally. And I think this actually might be like a more gambly kind of Pokemon than Swag Play. Like the Thunderwave, Swagger, Prankster, if they hit themselves in confusion, they die. If they hit you, you die. I think Silvally is even more gambly than that, so it can have insane highs if it has the right moves at the right time, but it also has insane lows as well. It just doesn't have the speed to compensate for it properly is my problem. And then Silvally into Salazzle. Yeah, Salazzle 2-shots us on like Sludge Bomb or Flamethrower, and then our damage in return is not going to be enough. Even with like an Adamant multi-attack move, unless it's super effective, we're not going to find it. If we're actually running it into, what would it be, like Life Orb, I think the Life Orb on return would kind of be it. So Life Orb return would actually find it, but then we'd have to be running Adamant. Say if we're running the Jolly Nature, it's still good. Okay, so that just kind of shows again, it's like, are we going to be running for coverage, or are we just kind of running for that return nuke level of damage? And then the Salazzle still has big damage back to us. So if it's already taking damage, if your Silvally is already taking damage, Salazzle, any kind of sweeper Pokemon is going to be a really fast in. So it's really, yeah, as I keep saying, it's right place at the right time times a million for Silvally. So there we go, guys. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.